I never thought it would happen to me. Not like this, and definitely not in a place like that. But love has a funny way of sneaking up on you when you're least prepared. I had just come out of a messy breakup. The kind that leaves you second-guessing everything and swearing off love for a while. So, I did the only thing I thought would take my mind off everything. I decided to take a solo trip, somewhere I'd never been, somewhere I wouldn't know a soul. My goal was simple: find myself again, away from anything familiar. I ended up in this charming little village on the coast. It was a place out of a postcard, quiet and quaint, where you could hear the waves from almost any corner. I was staying in a cozy inn run by an older couple who treated every guest like family. For a few days, I settled into a new routine, and it was just what I needed: peaceful, undisturbed. But then, on the third morning, everything changed. It was raining, and I ducked into a small cafe to escape the downpour. The place was nearly empty, except for one other person. This guy sitting alone at a table, eyes glued to his book, totally unaware of the world around him. I'm not one to start conversations with strangers, but something about him, I don't know, he just looked interesting. The kind of person with a story. I ordered my coffee, trying not to stare, but then he looked up, caught my eye, and smiled. And just like that, I was drawn in. We ended up talking for hours, just the two of us in that little cafe, the rain tapping softly on the window. His name was Adrian. He was a writer, traveling for inspiration, he said, though he never quite clarified for what. I liked that mysterious side of him. He kept me guessing, and for the first time in a long time I found myself laughing, genuinely smiling. Over the next few days we kept running into each other, almost as if fate had a hand in it. At first, I thought it was just a fling, some distraction to take my mind off things. But as our conversations grew deeper, so did my feelings. We talked about everything, from silly childhood memories to fears we'd never shared with anyone. Adrian was so different from anyone I'd ever met. He understood me in ways that felt almost unreal. But just when things started feeling too perfect, a twist came, as if fate wanted to test us. He told me he had to leave the next day for a family obligation, something unexpected that couldn't wait. My heart dropped. It was like the rug had been pulled out from under me. I tried to play it cool, pretend it didn't matter. But that night, I lay awake, wondering if this was it, if our paths would just part here, leaving me to wonder what could have been. The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave, there was a knock on my door. It was Adrian, holding a small note in his hand. He said, "Before I go, I need you to know." But he didn't finish his sentence. Instead, he handed me the note, kissed me softly, and left. I didn't dare open it right away, afraid of what I might find. Finally, as the day faded, I opened the note. It read, "Sometimes, love doesn't fit into plans. But if you're willing to take a chance, I'll find a way back to you." And just like that, he was gone. I went home, trying to shake off the memory, but his words stayed with me, haunting me in the best way. Weeks passed, and just when I thought it was over, that I'd romanticized the whole thing, there was a message in my inbox. Adrian was coming back, and this time he wasn't leaving without a fight. I never saw it coming, but love found me, in the most unexpected way. And sometimes, those are the love stories that change us the most. When I saw that message from Adrian, my heart raced like never before. He was coming back. After weeks of overthinking, wondering if I'd imagined the connection, here he was, reaching out. But something in his message was different. It wasn't the casual, charming tone he used to have. There was urgency, something unspoken that pulled me back into that whirlwind. He arrived a week later, and we decided to meet at the same little cafe where we'd first met. The second I saw him, it was like the weeks apart had never happened. But something was different about him. His usual ease had been replaced with an intensity, an almost nervous energy. As soon as we sat down, Adrian took my hands in his. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, voice low. My heart dropped. A part of me braced for the worst, but I nodded, signaling him to go on. "I wanted to be with you from the moment I met you," he began. "But there's something you need to know about me." He paused, the words hanging in the air like they carried all the weight in the world. My mind raced with possibilities. Did he have a complicated past? A family he hadn't mentioned? He looked down, took a shaky breath, and then continued. "The reason I had to leave so suddenly It wasn't just family. He hesitated, glancing away, and then he looked back into my eyes. I was in the middle of something when I met you, something complicated. And meeting you, falling for you, it made everything so much more messy. I pulled my hands back slightly, feeling a pang of doubt. Messy? Adrian, what are you saying? My voice trembled as I tried to piece everything together. I was engaged, he said, his voice almost a whisper. My heart felt like it had stopped, the word engaged echoing in my mind, shattering the perfect image I'd built of him. But before I could react, he held up his hand. Please let me explain, he said. It was an arranged engagement, something my family had pushed me into, and I'd been planning to end it for months. But then I met you, and everything changed. I left because I needed to break it off for good. I couldn't come to you with that kind of baggage. You deserve more. I looked down, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to walk away, angry that he hadn't told me sooner. But then I thought back to our time together, the way he'd looked at me, the honesty in his eyes, the depth in his words. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid you'd leave. Afraid I'd lose you before I even had the chance to show you how much you mean to me. He reached out, gently lifting my chin until our eyes met. Please, give me a chance to prove myself, to start fresh with nothing between us. 1,000 thoughts flooded my mind, but the one that stood out was a feeling I couldn't ignore, a feeling of something real despite the lies, the complications. I could feel my heart softening despite the mess of it all. So I nodded slowly. I'm giving you one chance, Adrian, but if there's anything else you're hiding. I trailed off, not sure I could bear another shock. He nodded, his face a mixture of relief and determination. I promise, from here on out, just you and me. Days passed, and we tried to settle into our new normal. But I could sense Adrian was still holding something back. Small things, phone calls he'd take out of earshot, messages he'd quickly put away. One evening, while we were out for dinner, his phone buzzed again, and he looked at it, his face immediately clouding over. I stared at him, the doubts creeping in again. Adrian, who is it? He glanced up, clearly caught off guard. It's complicated. My heart sank. There was always that word with him. Complicated. Messy. I looked him straight in the eyes. I need the truth, Adrian. Now. He took a deep breath, then finally confessed. It's her. My ex-fiancée. She hasn't taken it well and has been reaching out, threatening to show up. What does she want? I whispered, the anger and hurt all bubbling up at once. She wants me back. She's saying she'll come here, that she'll do anything to ruin things between us. He rubbed his forehead in frustration. I wanted to shield you from all of this, but she's not letting go. I sat back, the gravity of everything hitting me again. Adrian, I can't be dragged into this drama. If you want to be with me, you need to cut her off completely. He nodded, his face serious. You're right. I'll end it for good this time. And I wanted to believe him. But the question lingered, a dark shadow over us. Could he really let go of his past? The next few days were tense, filled with anxious glances and half smiles, both of us waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then, it did. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there she was, Adrian's ex-fiancée, looking as if she'd come to settle unfinished business. I froze, clutching the door, heart pounding. Her presence radiated confidence, mixed with an air of desperation. Her eyes flickered over me, a subtle smirk twisting at the corner of her mouth. So, she said, crossing her arms, you're the reason he walked away. For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. I wasn't prepared to be face to face with Adrian's past, especially not like this. I could feel my anger boiling up, but I swallowed hard, determined to stay calm. Yes, I am, I replied, meeting her gaze with steady eyes. But he left because he didn't love you anymore. You deserve someone who truly wants to be with you, and so do I. She laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. You really think it's that simple? Her voice softened, turning almost pitying. Adrian and I go way back. You're just a distraction. Her words stung, but I held my ground. If you believe that, then why are you here? Her face twisted, the confident facade slipping. Because I can't let him go. You don't understand. We were supposed to have a future together. Our families are intertwined. This isn't just about love, it's about everything we've built. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe that's the problem. He doesn't want a relationship that's built on expectations. He wants love. He wants freedom. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, but just as quickly, her expression hardened. Let's be real. Adrian may be with you now, but when things get tough, he'll come back to me. I know him better than you ever will. Before I could respond, Adrian appeared behind her, his face a mix of shock and anger. What are you doing here? He demanded. She turned to him, her expression shifting to a wounded look. I came to remind you of everything you're leaving behind. We had a future planned, Adrian. This phase you're in will pass. Adrian stepped between us, his eyes meeting mine. This isn't a phase, he said firmly. I love her, not you. His words were like a final blow, clear and definitive, and I could see them cut through her pride. Her face fell, and for a second she looked vulnerable, defeated. But then she straightened, tossing her hair back. Fine, she spat, her voice sharp, but don't expect me to wait around when you realize you've made a mistake. She stormed off, leaving us standing in the doorway, the tension hanging thick in the air. Adrian turned to me, his face filled with a mixture of relief and guilt. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I nodded, my emotions still a whirlwind. I know, but you need to deal with your past, Adrian, completely. I won't be the second choice. He stepped closer, his gaze intense. You're not a choice. You're the only one I want. He reached for my hand, and though I wanted to pull away, a part of me held on, feeling the warmth of his touch. Then prove it, I whispered, not entirely sure if I was ready to believe him. Show me that this is real, that she's truly in the past. In the days that followed, Adrian did everything he could to prove his loyalty. He cut all ties with his ex-fiancée, blocking her calls and making it clear to everyone around him that he was committed to me. But her words haunted me, creeping into my mind at the worst moments, planting seeds of doubt that I couldn't shake. Just when things started to feel normal, life threw us one last twist. Adrian got a job offer across the country. It was a dream opportunity, one he'd been working toward for years. And the position, it started in 2 weeks. When he told me, his face was a mix of excitement and dread. I don't want to leave you, he said, voice low, but this is everything I've worked for. I wish I could have both. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, the reality of it sinking in. If he took the job, he'd be hours away. We'd just fought so hard to be together, and now this? I wanted to tell him to stay, to choose me over his career, but something held me back. I knew how much he'd sacrificed already, and I couldn't be the reason he gave up on his dreams. So instead, I made a choice I never thought I would. I think you should go, I said, the words catching in my throat. This is your chance, Adrian. I don't want you to resent me for holding you back. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for any sign that I was kidding, but I held my ground, even as my heart broke. Finally, he nodded, pulling me into a tight embrace. I'll come back for you, he promised, his voice raw with emotion. This isn't the end. And so he left, with one last kiss and a promise to return. Watching him walk away felt like a part of me was leaving with him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our story was far from over. In the weeks that followed, we stayed in touch, messaging constantly, trying to bridge the distance between us. But as the months went on, the calls grew shorter, the messages less frequent. Life was pulling us in different directions, and despite everything, I could feel him slipping away. One evening, just as I was beginning to accept that maybe some love stories weren't meant to last, there was a knock on my door. I opened it, and there he was, standing on my doorstep, his eyes full of that same fire I'd seen the first day we met. I couldn't do it, he said, voice thick with emotion. I couldn't live that life without you. And in that moment, I knew. Sometimes, love doesn't just come unexpectedly. It stays, against all odds, even when the world tries to tear it apart.